Hi there, Butchie. It's Roz.
From Scully Jangling About the Books.
Yes.
And Tilly from the now defunct Tilly Shelf.
I don't think we'll say defunct. I think we'll say kind of...
wound down.
Temporarily wound down.
Suspended.
on hiatus, something like that. But, we still talk about books. And this year we are, again, doing a thing of reading a relatively new sort of contemporary fiction book each month and talking about it together. And we're here in person to talk this time about this
Motherless Land by Nikki May. So this is our July read. The eagle-eyed among you might notice that we skipped our June read, but we're going to do that later. We just wanted to discuss our July read during July and share the video in July because it is Jane Austen July, and this is a modern retelling of a Jane Austen novel.
Mm-hmm.
Which Jane Austen novel? My favourite Jane Austen novel, Mansfield Park. I just committed myself. I just said it was my favourite. I decided. We had a long, lots of discussions about it, but in the end, I think I've decided that Mansfield Park is my favourite.
Currently,
yeah.
Because
it changes.
Austen's for life, not just for Jane Austen July. And over the decades, these things change.
So this Motherless Land is retelling is probably too strict of a term, but it's a renewed approach
Inspired
to
by
ideas of Mansfield Park.
Yes, yeah.
Or something along those lines.
Yes. Mansfield Park was Nikki May specifically says that Mansfield Park was her sort of jumping off point for writing this. She reread Mansfield Park and it had this inspiration for a story that would also be quite personal to her and her experience.
So this Motherless Land is it's told from two points of view, Kate or Funke and Liv, and we'll explain more about why one of them's got two names as we go along. And those of you who know and love Mansfield Park will know that it starts with Fanny Price being removed from her family and sent to live with live at Mansfield Park with her cousins. And what happens in this book is that tragedy occurs at the end of the fairly long first chapter, and that leads to Funke, who has grown up in Lagos, in Nigeria, being sent to England to live in a stately home in the 1970s.
Yes, the first part of the book is in 1978.
Yeah,
and we hop on through
decades.
Yes, 8 years, 6 years, but with these two characters, Funke and Liv, or Funke or Kate.
Yes. Well, she arrives in this stately home, and she's immediately told that her name is Kate, which is her middle name, because she had an English mother from this stately home, and that she's told, well, you can't possibly be called your name, we're going to call you Kate. So that goes through her life. So it very much speaks to the themes from Mansfield Park of dislocation and what it means to have a home, and the disadvantages that she has as a dependent in the family.
Yes, of being part of the family, but not seen on a par with your cousins.
Yeah, like there's quite a good line in it where her cousin Liv is talking about, my grandmother, my great grandmother was such and such an important person, and she says, and
Funke says,
that's my great grandmother too. Like I'm part of this family.
So the themes in the book definitely pick up on themes that are in Mansfield Park, but because also themes about sort of who you finding yourself in a situation where perhaps you find someone to connect with in this other family, whilst others might be unkind to you or patronise you or be dismissive of you, and some might ignore you, but that you do you can form bonds.
Liv's mother is very much a Mrs. Norris type character. And I think Mrs. Norris is one of the most unpleasant characters in the whole of Austen's work. She has a lot of great unpleasant characters, but the relentlessness of Mrs. Norris and the fact that it's somebody that's with you pretty much in your own house for years, it pushes it from this is an unpleasant person to this is sort of abusive. Liv's mother, you get Margot. That kind of really intense negativity and emotional suppression from quite strongly.
And because like Austen's sort of nasty characters are often also like they tend to be quite fully rounded, and you have even like someone like Mr. Collins, who's sort of on one level poisonous. Actually, he's trying to do the right thing,
and you can kind of see why he's like that.
Also, but like where Mrs. Norris is one of the most sort of
quite nasty and very mean.
And that's
financially as well as
and that is something that Margaret has in common with her. But what I would say is when you say it's not a retelling, and it's that there's lots of thematic connections and kind of and emotional sort of reflections, but in terms of exact plot, it diverges quite widely.
And like so it starts out with a bit of a similar trajectory, but then it does kind of it tells its own story, which is great.
Which is good. Well, is it great?
Is it great?
Okay.
So we tend to have different opinions about Austen retellings, don't we?
But I entered on this one very optimistically. Why was I very optimistic? Because it's a modern day retelling and not really claiming to be a retelling. It's inspired by.
It's not somebody who's trying to write exactly like Austen and trying to write as if they were in the time, but without quite understanding the rules.
All of those things, which is usually a problem for me about Austen retellings, didn't apply. Also, I really like the sound of the author. She's kind of British Nigerian. She, like Funke, she had an English mother and a Nigerian father. She was born in England and moved as a baby, 1 year old to Lagos, and then comes back again when she's 20. So and she's like it's her second book.
First book was really
highly acclaimed. Wahala, very funny apparently. I mean,
I quite like that actually.
So I didn't come to this in any negative frame of mind, okay, but I was sort of texting Tilly saying, after sort of like, I don't know,
you very nearly gave up almost from the get-go. You did almost from the first
not from the get-go, but I was about sort of 50 pages in or whatever, and just saying, does this get any better? Because I'm not sure I could stomach it.
And I think some of it is expectation, because obviously you went in having read some of the reviews and so on. And what I do with this project is basically Ros tells me a book and I read the title and nothing else. So I go in completely blind, but just trusting Ros to have made the right decision. So if I don't like the start of it, I just keep going because I'm like, well, Ros must have made the right decision here.
Whereas I'd read some really positive reviews of this Motherless Land that implied that it was sort of quite nuanced and complex, and and the beginning of the book, obviously we're seeing things through the eyes of a 10-year-old.
And I saw that, and I read Child Narrator, and I thought Jane Austen retelling, Child Narrator. I just immediately mentally categorized it as YA, and that's not correct. That's not how it's been marketed, but that probably affected the way that I was reading it and the way that I was just approaching it as a story.
Exactly. And once I kind of shifted my mindset I suppose, and started to read it with the expectations of a sort of
more of the tropes that would fit potentially with
yes. Then I had a much more positive reading experience. So I just had to get beyond the expectation that it was going to be something of sort of, not that I was expecting it to be Mansfield Park, but I was expecting quite a sort of a more, I was going to say more serious book. It is a serious book.
It's not serious.
No, it deals with very serious emotions and issues and politics.
And I think some of it is like I mentioned, the child narrator thing that made me think, oh, it's YA. You've previously talked about how child narrators are really difficult to get right.
Difficult to get right. And she doesn't do a terrible job of writing.
No, I mean, they're believable characters.
Very believable.
But a child narrator doesn't often go hand in hand with the kind of book that I think that you were maybe expecting.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. And
but I found that once I got past the beginning, I actually found it gripping in that weird way where you kind of know what's going to happen, but you want to see it happen anyway. And it's just a little bit. There's bits that are kind of quite melodramatic and bits that are quite.
Just slightly. I mean, at times it's a bit exaggerated.
Yeah, a bit beyond reality.
Yeah.
There's a word for that, but I can't think of it.
Yes, but there are geese flying over.
You might be able to
Which
hear.
you may be able to hear.
Because the door's open.
The door's open because it's hot. And if you just heard a really strange sound, I think, what on earth is that noise? It was the geese flying over the house. Okay, now just moving on. So, I definitely warmed to the book as I went on. I got engaged in the plot. I felt attached to the characters, particularly the two main characters, and I became more interested in the ideas she was sort of trying to raise and so on. I think one of the things that I really liked about the book, because having sort of sounded a bit negative, I need to talk about things how I thought it was really interesting how she wrote about like England and Nigeria from the perspective of someone who has lived in both, from the perspective, I think Nikki May has the perspective of someone who's experienced racism in both, because she's, like a dual heritage, she portrays that what's good and bad about both places, both societies, both cultures, in a really, and I thought she did that like really well, and was also very funny about both places. She's definitely someone who can write humour.
That was something that I wanted to comment on as well. The sense of place that you get and the setting that you get for both theatres of the story. It's fantastic.
Like Funke's really shocked by how kind of like scruffy and grubby and sort of shabby this house
houses
that she comes to.
She's like they've got like a carpet, like a carpet up a fancy flight of stairs that's just a runner of carpet up the middle. She's like, can they not afford to get carpet across the whole stairs? And
like everything in the house is old and tatty, which of course is very sort of English upper class or upper middle class, thing, but it's like, well, why haven't they got a nice new bathroom or because in my house in Lagos, everything was
got all of this new stuff. But that's and I think it's a story about privilege in some ways, and Funke, in both areas where she lives, she's in a well-off family. It's not like Mansfield Park where there's more of a kind of there is a class gap. But obviously the perception when she comes to England is that she can't possibly have had anything nice. Back in Africa,
she's more or less, come from some sort of mud hut, and and that, and it was, I thought one of the very telling moments was that when she starts school in England, and like it dawns on her that they just assume she's stupid. And then she's very successful at school, but so all of that really worked for me.
But I was talking about it being a book about privilege, and there's a lot in it about people using their connections and how that works in both countries.
Yeah.
Like, but the kind of nepotism or the networks that people exploit to get their own way, and how that is quite insidious.
In both cultures. So that was a real area of strength. Is it right if I talk about an area of weakness for me?
Yeah. I'm not the police. I'm not going to stop you from. Go for it.
Well, and the thing that I suppose made it feel, perhaps once I got beyond the child narrator bit, the bit that made it feel a bit lacking a little bit of sort of depth, was that some of the characters are quite caricatured.
Yes, and I would say the same.
Some of the characters are rich and then some,
Yeah, and it is, to an extent, it boils down to there being like one or two big baddies that are driving the plot through being just baddies, rather than there being like nuance and complication in that aspect.
Yeah, and that always frustrates me a bit in the book,
because most people aren't that.
Most people aren't like constantly rude and constantly unkind, or yes, in an unremitting way, I suppose. Yeah.
And I think one thing for me was, obviously it goes over a large span of time, and people do fall in and out of your life, but there were some characters that I felt were set up quite strongly at the start that didn't end up carrying on through the story, that I would have liked to just see them participating more in later scenes.
Yeah, and there were just a few sort of implausibilities when people sort of, I don't mean like odd events, coincidences. They're allowed in literature because in a novel, because that's why the story happens, that things happen. But when people do things that sort of feel really out of character in order for the plot to work. That's another thing that annoys me slightly. But I don't want to be overly negative. So
I think that's one of the things that makes me feel like why it gives off the YA kind of vibe to me, I suppose, is that kind of air of improbability.
But I think if you come into it with the right sort of expectations and frame of mind, there's lots about it that is.
And I found it a page turner.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the time you get to the end, because I just wanted to know what was going to happen.
Yes, and I cared about what happened to Funke and
both of them, actually.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And
even though, I suppose both of them, but I think particularly Liv, they do things that aren't perfect, because people do.
Yeah, and Liv is a very rounded character. Yes, she has strengths and weaknesses, and her weaknesses catch her out, but her strengths kind of pull her through, and that's the satisfying character,
And there are some nice romantic moments, particularly for Liv. There's some nice romantic moments.
Yeah. So, it's not a sort of it's not a Roz book, but it wasn't a bad book. Yeah.
I think if you're looking for Jane Austen retellings and you're looking for ones that are not set in Jane Austen's time, then definitely give it a try. And particularly if you're looking for one that's not just another Pride and Prejudice one, because much as we love Pride and Prejudice, it's nice to branch out into some of the other books.
And a book that is in a way that Mansfield Park is in some ways, Austen's most sort of kind of politically and socially complex novel. This has those.
It works in that setting.
In that setting. So that's definitely a positive about it, and I love the parrot.
Oh yes, brilliant parrot.
All books should have a great parrot, shouldn't they? and what I was thrilled to find out is that actually the parrot is based on the author Nikki May's real childhood parrot.
Oh,
she had that parrot.
On that note, shall we finish?
Yes.
And go and dream about parrots.
Yes. Bye.
Thank you for watching.